And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
I don't care!
What's next?
What's next?
What's next?
Don't you want to hear what's next?
What are you going to do next?
What's next for you?
What's next?
What's next?
Okay, so what's next?
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of After the Gold. And this week we're going to be looking at the film Shutter Island, one of the most interesting Best Picture follow-ups, and how un-awards baity it really is. Talk about the legacy of Martin Scorsese, and talk about really a very entertaining and great movie. But if you're new to the series, that's what I do every single week. Talk about Best Picture follow-up movies. What is the movie that a director made right after winning Best Picture? What can we glean from what they decide to use their creative blank check on? Did they use it on something that's been a passion project? Did they see an increase in budget? What was it about the kind of history of the movie that made them want to do this film? I talk a bit about where they were in their period of time. And then in the second half of the video, I talk about my thoughts on the film, why I think it's interesting, why I think I recommend it, why I want to kind of discuss it on an episode of this show, and why I want to cover it, because there is no kind of a structure to these episodes. We'll jump over all the place, going from the 40s to the 2010s to the 90s to all over the place. The only underlying reasoning for any of it is that I find something interesting about the movie, either the production history or the movie itself. So you can kind of jump in if you've seen the movies, or if not, you can kind of learn something new and maybe check out a great film. And as always, if you enjoy these videos, feel free to comment below. Let me know if you've seen this film. Do you enjoy it? Do you understand it within the kind of context of Scorsese's career? I'd love to hear all that stuff in the comments down below. But without further ado, let's jump into things, starting off with the first part of the video, which is the production history and where we were when this movie got made. And really why I wanted to cover it was because when you get the opportunity to do a Martin Scorsese movie, you leap at that opportunity. And I think in the history and the kind of context of his career, this is a unique one in how non-prestige it was and not focused on it necessarily, and how it was almost he needed another kind of a big hit before he could make maybe his true blank check. We'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But before we go forwards, we have to go backwards. Let's talk about 2006's The Departed, the Best Picture winning The Departed, the movie that Martin Scorsese is coming off of at this moment in time. A huge kind of it's time Oscar, and we see this for the Oscar heads. They know that whether it be in acting but also in directing can happen. An actor like an Al Pacino will not win for so many times, and then when Scent of a Woman comes around, it feels like, okay, well, we have to give him an award. It's insane that the great Al Pacino doesn't have an award, and oftentimes they never get kind of rewarded for the right movie. And in the director's cases, it's almost less so of it's time, but almost of it's undeniable. I think of Spielberg, who was trying to get Oscars in the 80s with some of his prestige movies, and it wasn't working out. And then in 93, he makes Schindler's List and Jurassic Park in the same year. And it's just undeniable at that point. And he wins the Best Picture and Director, and it's kind of a whole coronation. I think Nolan, a couple of years ago with Oppenheimer, was another kind of another great movie, an undeniable type of a movie. And Scorsese was kind of in this position too, where The Departed was supposed to be a commercial play. It wasn't supposed to be an Oscars movie, but he'd been trying to do Oscars movies with Gangs of New York and Aviator, and they were getting nominated, but they weren't, winning. So he does more of a commercial play. It was this big hit gangster movie with huge movie stars. It was another great, Scorsese gangster movie, and we liked Goodfellas and Casino and Mean Streets, and it was like, you know what, it's time. It's the fact that he doesn't have one, and he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. It was kind of that momentum, and he kind of cruised on to win the Golden Globes and the DGA and eventually the Oscars. And it was also big in the context of Scorsese's career, because for the most part, even though he was 10, 15 movies into his career at that point, he hadn't had many huge box office hits. He wasn't a box office filmmaker. It really, and aside from Cape Fear in 91, it really was until his collaborations with DiCaprio in the 2000s when his movies started to do a lot better at the box office. And yet, when we think about technically his next follow-up movie, 2006, 4 years later, 2010, Shutter Island, this isn't a kind of blank check. His budget remained very similar from The Departed to Shutter Island. Still strong budget, $80-90 million, but it wasn't a huge jump up to $200 million. If you actually look at kind of his blank check, the movie that he really wanted to do and use some of the success of his past movies to kind of cash in on, I would think would be the next year, 2011, Hugo. So in a way, the way I think about this movie, and I'm not exactly sure how to think about this movie in the context of his career, but it seems like almost he made The Departed, it was a big hit, it won Best Picture, he almost needed another kind of a genre type of another big hit so that they could eventually finance Hugo and kind of give him the keys to Hugo, which is more of a blank check type of a movie, $170-200 million to actually make it. 3D technology, doesn't have a main star. Really, the hook is just the passion of cinema. So it is kind of a unique parallel there. And Shutter Island's the movie right before that, which is technically the movie right after The Departed, which is why we wanted to cover it on the show. But it is almost a movie that wasn't made for awards. And in the context of his career, post The Departed, he's made post this film, actually, I guess he's made 5 films. And 4 out of those 5 got nominated for Best Picture. And even if you consider The Departed or Gangs of New York or Aviator, in the 21st century, Martin Scorsese, if he has a new movie coming out, it gets nominated for Best Picture pretty much every single time. And Shutter Island wasn't even positioned with that. I mean, a movie like Silence, which didn't get nominated for Best Picture, was at least positioned for that, released in, I think it was December at that time, maybe played, I think it was New York, and kind of did the later festival run, but still that time of year. Shutter Island was leaning into the genre elements of the movie. It was released, actually pushed out of the awards season into, I think it was February. I think it was ultimately the right choice. This was probably too genre and horror for the Academy to really appreciate it. Maybe it gets nominated for Best Picture, but nothing kind of serious. It's not an awards type of a movie. It does well at the box office when it didn't have as much to compete with in a quieter time like February. So I think everything worked out in that sense. But in the context of his career, I think a lot of people don't consider it as one of the top tier Scorsese's because it wasn't released in the fall. It didn't have that prestige focus. It wasn't talking about a serious type of an issue, let's say. It's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more popcorn focused. It's maybe more in line with a Cape Fear or Wolf of Wall Street, or I'd say Goodfellas than, Kundun and The Age of Innocence and Silence, and maybe more of the highbrow type of films that he's making in. And yet, what's so great about Scorsese is that every movie he does is the best version of that movie. It's still worthy of discussion. So you may have thought of this as a lower tier Scorsese, but I think to the average person, you can see that on its IMDb score, it's very well regarded. This is one of the highest movies on IMDb in Scorsese's entire career. And I think that makes sense to me. 15 years later, the movie's modern day legacy is still one that's of great admiration because DiCaprio is such a well-regarded star, and I think that people still go back to this movie, and I, after rewatching it for this episode, was amazed at that being 15 years old, it still feels like a modern movie. It's still not super scary. It's kind of got this mystery element, so it invites people in. It's a very entertaining, engaging movie, and I think it's also an easy recommend to a lot of people. It can be a little bit intense to certain people, but it's a very easy to recommend and enjoyable movie. It's also a movie that I think holds up better on rewatches as well. So if you haven't checked out Shutter Island in a while, I think its modern day reputation definitely has grown, even to being a pretty solid hit in February, although at the time I think still regarded as maybe a minor work. It didn't get nominated for Best Picture, didn't get nominated for any Oscars, probably didn't make that many top 10 of the year lists. It was kind of like a February genre thriller type of a play, but the best version of it with these super high-level craftsmen and this incredible ensemble of actors. And I think that's its kind of modern-day reputation, where it's maybe even slightly underrated. But then when you talk to people who actually have seen the movie, maybe non-film fans that are considering it in the context of Scorsese's career, like we are here, they really enjoy the movie. And I think it's definitely grown in estimation over time. So now transitioning into my thoughts on the film. One part of the reason, probably the main reason why I want to cover this movie is because I enjoy it so much. This was a real kind of interesting find for me when I was going back and discovering Scorsese's career, just how enjoyable and entertaining it is. I think the thing that when I first watched the movie that jumped out to me is I think this is maybe DiCaprio's best performance, or it's definitely in its top 3. I think a bit biased because this time period of 2010 to 2015, I was really, learning about movies, and that was kind of a good time period for me. But I do think this kind of period of 2010 to 2013 This movie, Inception, Wolf of Wall Street, Django Unchained. I mean, my top 3 DiCaprio performances may be Wolf of Wall Street, Django, and this movie. I think it's a movie that without this kind of central performance wouldn't be as strong as it is. It's also a movie without spoiling anything that on multiple rewatches you understand the kind of layers that DiCaprio is bringing to the character. Whereas on the first watch, he's definitely doing something and it reads as one thing and it doesn't kind of give away anything. But on the second time, you realize the small little things that he is doing. And with that kind of unique perspective, after having seen the movie, you understand the different layers of the movie, of him, in particular his performance and kind of what he's giving in this movie, the first time watching it, being this kind of a cop who's come to this prison island and is losing his mind. And DiCaprio kind of is able to give some of that unsuredness, the mystery of not only the island but of the man, and the kind of battles and the demons that he's bringing to the movie itself. You kind of aren't sure of this unreliable narrator in a way, and this really kind of twitchy, relentless burst of anger type of moments that he has showcase, I think, DiCaprio's acting, and also puts us in this kind of mystery, unsure what's going on, what's the eeriness of the island. He kind of is able to match that energy and tone. So we know that something is up, but we know that something is up not just because of the odd coincidences of the script, the story that's telling, but because of the unnervy energy that DiCaprio is bringing without even speaking sometimes, just the way he's like darting his eyes around a room or kind of walking around it and kind of prancing around things. It is a kind of unique physical performance in that way that you may not realize he's kind of adding to, but when we talk about things like tone and atmosphere and believing into the story, oftentimes that comes from the energy of the actors, and even something as simple as how they move around screen or how they kind of furrow their eyebrows or what have you. They bring that sense of, in this case, uneasiness to the story. And another thing that I think jumped out to me on rewatch is the cinematography of this is just so beautiful and so stylized. This is the work of Robert Richardson, who was a legendary cinematographer who's worked with, Oliver Stone and Scorsese, and he's, one of my favorites of all time, and I think this may be one of, if not his best work. Absolutely incredible, up there with, I think, maybe like Casino or Platoon. What's great about this, though, is that it's so stylized, and I think Scorsese is so indebted to the Val Lewton movies of the 40s and kind of some giallo films or just universal horror monsters, noirs of type movies of the period. He's inspired by so many of those movies that have more kind of stylized photography, and he allows Richardson to utilize that. We have really high angle or low angle shots at many times to bring the sense of kind of grandiosity to the movie. What I love about the movie as well is that there's always some sort of a layer in front of the camera or something either obscuring it or something in the background. There's kind of multiple dimensions, foreground, background, midground. So you'll have a scene with DiCaprio and Ruffalo, but then there'll be a perfectly placed security guard in the background to tell you that people are always watching. And then also sometimes he'll light a scene with a single source of light from a match held up really closely to an actor's face. Or there's a scene with an open fire and you see the flames coming in and out, obscuring the kind of face of the actor. One scene where ash is literally raining and coating the entire kind of screen, and it's a unique, beautiful, kind of haunting, gothic type of an image. Richardson knows and understands these kind of references, I think, deeply, and is able to add this very clear sense of visual imagery to the film. When I think of Shutter Island, I think of how wet the movie is and their costuming and how dark and dusty the kind of corners are, and the eeriness, like I mentioned, that's so great and what makes the movie so entertaining and engaging is due to the craft. And that's why I think I like the movie so much in part two, is it's not just a genre movie that you can see. They make a million of them every February or Halloween season, horror movies, thriller movies. It's all these extra parts that are so amazing. Yes, it's a great screenplay with some entertaining kind of twists and turns and mysteries, the island and what's going on. But then you also have an expert director honing in everything, making sure everything is clear and understandable to the audience. Incredible performances all around. In particular, though, I do think by DiCaprio keeping that energy to the movie that helps and aids the script. And then you have an incredible cinematographer, costume designers that are adding to the period accurate and uniquely kind of odd situation and unnerviness that the movie brings. And this movie, in an odd way, its sister movie in Scorsese's career would be King of Comedy, where Scorsese himself isn't necessarily showing off, or it's a deep personal subject to him in the context of his career and, Christianity or Catholicism or gangsters necessarily, right, which we know him to be so interested in. It's almost more like King of Comedy, where it's a great role for its lead actor. And it's an interesting story with some interesting comments about different things that maybe Scorsese isn't always interested in. So it may not feel of a piece to some of his other movies, but it's a classic example of just a great story made by a great director, done to the absolute highest ability. And those are fun too. And not everything needs to connect to the larger kind of thematic story of Scorsese's filmography. Sometimes they can be really fun, entertaining, engaging movies, especially when they've got some of the best performances from some of the best actors of all time, some of the best craftsmen working at their highest peak. It really is a fun movie for that way. And I do think it's a kind of guaranteed home run for a lot of people. So if you haven't checked it out, please definitely do. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on Shutter Island. Let me know if you want me to cover any upcoming directors. One of the comments a few weeks ago recommended covering Robert Zemeckis' follow-up to Forrest Gump Contact. We are actually going to be covering that next week, so if you want to catch ahead or do a quick rewatch of Contact, that'll be a fun episode, I think. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.